Dr. Wilkinson, if you can give some brief comments, and then we'll allow a few minutes for more exchange. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I will be brief because I do want to maximise questions time. The thrust of my personal submission is, firstly, why regulatory equality is really important for community wellbeing. It's not an ideological thing. And that's the real motivation for my support for this bill. And the fundamental common law principles is where it draws on most heavily, and are enumerated from the legislative guidelines. It's not something we've made up, deeply embedded in Anglo-Saxon law. And that big appendix is my biggest contribution to the committee. It's a labour of love, 42 responses to questions. But since making that submission, Mr. Chairman, I've prepared another note which really compares the principles with those which are required by that Cabinet Office circular I mentioned earlier. And if you like, if it's useful to you, I could table that for the committee's consideration. It also addresses the question of the costs, and are they really going to be as large as the Ministry of Regulations suggested? That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, no, I'm sure everyone's happy to receive that additional information. I'm going to go to Dr. Duncan Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I've read your submissions and other material that you've written on this, and it does strike me that there's something of a communication breakdown, because this framework, which you've had a lot to do with, is in a sense an economic theory, isn't it? It's a theory that prosperity is based on unfettered exchange, voluntary exchange of private property. Would that be a fair observation?
No, absolutely not. It's the rule of law. What government does is absolutely crucial to prosperity, for better or for worse. The principle of this bill is Parliament can pass anything it likes. It is the sovereign lawmaker. There's nothing in this bill which stops it from passing anything it likes. It's really important. It's absolutely essential that governments do things well. National defence, the courts, police, public.
Throughout your submission, you say voluntary exchange is the cornerstone of prosperity. They're roughly your words in a number of spots. And I guess that's what I'm latching onto.
No, there's nothing in there at all which says that public goods aren't important. To the contrary, it says that Parliament is the collective which represents the public good. Parliamentary sovereignty is maintained, so the collective dominates. All it's saying is what's in the legislative guidelines, that when government acts, it should do so in a principled way. Well, who could argue with that? So then the question is, what are the good principles? That's where the legislation guidelines come in. That's what they've been about.
Okay. So, but your principles look to, various things: rule of law, non-retrospectivity, private property and takings. But they leave out Indigenous people's rights, disabled people's rights, human rights, environmental biodiversity, and all of these other values, which in other systems outside, and I'm not saying economics isn't important, but outside of kind of a fiscal economics, considered to be central touchstones for good legislation. I'm just really perplexed as to why your principles are kind of so impoverished of all of those other values, which everyone here has been talking about.
No, well, with respect, that's totally wrong. They're all there. What it's doing is taking the fundamental principles out of the legislative guidelines. So rule of law, dignity of the individual, security of the individual in their persons, they can't get assaulted, smashed up, and in their possessions. Those are pretty fundamental to the good society.
What about
all this is doing is making sure executive government reports to Parliament on those fundamentals.
But why is the right of Indigenous peoples to express their culture and for government to protect that not part of your framework?
It doesn't exclude it. Tell me this.
No,
Tell
but
me
it
this.
deprioritises
What protection for Maori is not in there in the existing principles that has been missed?
Okay.
That's what I want to know.
The protection of traditional waiata, which might be in your framework a property right, but if you look at how those kinds of things have been addressed previously, they've been addressed in entirely different ways.
Well, there's absolutely nothing here which stops that, but the common law always
No,
does this.
but it doesn't stop it, but it deprioritizes it. It makes it a second order rule.
Okay, I'll let Dr.
priorities-
Wilkinson respond, and then we're going to go to Dr. Deborah Russell. I'm just conscious we've got to be fair to everyone else that's queued up this afternoon.
Okay, the priorities are done in the legislative guidelines. Chapter 4 does the fundamental principles.
Okay, Dr. Russell.
Thank you, Bryce, for your presentation today and for your thinking. Look, I've been following this debate very, very closely too, and I listened to you on Morning Report the other day, and I'm going to paraphrase, but you more or less said that the opposition to the bill was that there was a lot of groupthink going on. People are telling themselves stuff that's not quite true, inventing false motives, and giving the bill sort of false motives for the bill of an unsavoury kind, and then they misrepresent the bill. That's a summary of what you said, not your exact words. I do have them written down. Do you still stand by that?
Yeah, what people are first doing is attacking the motives behind the bill, and they're saying it purports to be just transparency and it purports to be concerned about productivity and stuff, but in fact, it's out to prioritise corporates over everything else. It's out to put an alien philosophy into the thing. So that's the very first thing people are telling each other, that this is all motivated. And it's not true. You know, I've been an economist in public policy committee working long hours ever since 1970. That is not the motivation, but people will not accept that this is about trying to see New Zealand a better place and about the well-being for all New Zealanders, as cost-benefit assessments are aimed to be benefits for all New Zealanders. So and then the second thing is, no one I know who's opposing the bill is admitting, well, that might be a bit of exaggeration, maybe the LDAC, but people are not recognising it preserves parliamentary sovereignty. They're thinking it stops Parliament from passing laws or it makes it harder. It doesn't.
Mrs. KapaKingi, Maramina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, Dr. Wilkinson. Thank you for your submission. Look, so the Supreme Court of Aotearoa has already told us that, noted that tikanga is the first law of the land. So in your view, should English common law be allowed to evolve in and of its own right, despite having no connection to pre-existing authority that emanates from this land? From this whenua? Be interested to hear your thoughts on that, Dr. Wilkinson. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. No, our courts, obviously, sorry, I don't mean to be offensive there, our courts will modify and evolve common law in the New Zealand direction, particularly now there isn't recourse to appeal to the Privy Council.
And that's despite the fact that the Supreme Court has already clarified, stated, noted that tikanga is the first law of the land.
That's what it's done. That's a fact.
So, Dr. Wilkinson, so do you agree that most peoples in most democracies in the world are not all English, and that no single democracy in the world are the same? So, but reflect the land and society those democracies are founded on.
Yes, definitely. I quote Confucius in one of my submissions.
I might jump in with just another observation. It's fun to think about what would have happened had something like the Regulatory Standards Bill been in effect when iwi lost the right to regulate their own housing on their own land. That was very clearly a taking that ought to have been considered.
Yeah, well, fun. I don't know whether it hasn't been fun. What, you know, here we are.
No, I agree.
And in fact, actually, yeah, and of course, you agree with it. We experience it.
Okay, members, we gave that as good a shake as we could as far as time goes.